My dad crippled Adrian Starr, the young master of a wealthy family in the capital. To repay my father's debt, Adrian has hated me for years, making me suffer endlessly. He always said, "Your life isn't worth as much as my 2 legs." But later, I caught him in his bedroom, calling my name while pleasuring himself. Ding! This novel reminds you to click the subscribe button in the bottom right corner to read the complete novel. The door was ajar. I was about to leave because no one wants to be caught in such a private moment. Especially since Adrian has a temper like a powder keg. I turned to leave, but the person inside called out, "Sophia Becker." "Here, here, here." I responded quickly, pushed the door open, and ran back in. "Damn it!" Adrian's busy hand froze, his eyes reddened with anger. "Turn around." I was stunned. I instantly understood that he didn't call my name because he noticed me outside the door. But rather, God. This pervert didn't even spare his enemy's daughter. My dad was a truck driver. 2 years ago, on a dark and windy night, he had a head-on collision with Adrian Starr, who was speeding on a motorcycle. After the accident, Adrian's legs lost all sensation. My dad died on the spot. The accident report said my dad was driving while fatigued and ran a red light. My mom's health was poor. She fainted on the spot upon hearing the bad news and has been in the hospital ever since. She needs expensive medical equipment and costly medication to stay alive. Are you looking for death, coming in uninvited? Adrian adjusted his clothes, his handsome face still flushed suspiciously. His words were harsher than the cigarette he was smoking. Indeed. Usually, only when young Master Adrian was in a bad mood and needed to vent his anger would he call me, his punching bag over. I fawningly went to get the ashtray. The hospital's equipment prices have gone up, and so have the new medications. So what? He glanced at me lazily. His standard phoenix eyes. Cold as ice, yet still captivating. So, can I delay this month's compensation payment? I smiled awkwardly. I'll make it up next month for sure. No. Adrian exhaled a puff of smoke, laughing cruelly. Your mom's life or death is none of my business. I choked and coughed, my eyes stinging. In truth, the compensation money from the car accident was pocket change for Adrian's wealthy family. But it was enough to break my back. 800,000. I dropped out of college, working 5 part-time jobs a day, sleeping only 4 hours a night. Every day I wake up thinking about making money. Numb to the core. Got it. I put down the ashtray in disappointment and turned to leave. Adrian called out to me, "There's a way to make me change my mind." Want to try? What? He leaned back in his wheelchair, his gloomy gaze falling between his legs, smiling deliberately. I'm not satisfied yet. My face was burning, my ears were hot, and my hands were trembling at my sides. I looked at him. You better keep your promise. The 5 short steps felt like walking on ice, torturous and terrifying. I knelt in front of Adrian and reached for his zipper. Because I was trembling, I fumbled several times. In the end, I couldn't hold back my tears. Tisk. Adrian impatiently swatted my hand away. Your crying is annoying me. I'm not in the mood anymore. Get out. I ran out as if escaping. Ran out of the villa, down the hill, and only when I saw the passing traffic did I squat by the roadside and vomit violently. Ring. The phone in my pocket rang. It was a call from the hospital. The nurse said my mom's expenses for the year had been paid. I asked how that happened. She said, Mr. Starr took care of it. Adrian Starr? I called him in confusion to ask why. The phone call was met with Adrian's furious roar. If you dare disturb my sleep again, I'll come and twist your head off. Useless worm. The familiar nasty nickname. It was what Adrian used to call me back in school. Adrian and I were college classmates. On the first day of school, I heard bad rumors about Adrian. He was the typical privileged playboy, and all the bad incidents at school seemed to be linked to him. I told myself to focus on my studies and ignore the gossip. Avoid Adrian Starr. But on the 3rd day, my only friend Vicky at school was cornered by Adrian's people. I found her in the old school building, her hair cut into a mess, and her face marked with slaps. She was crying hysterically. Adrian, your rare gem is here. One of the guys with a buzz cut whistled and teased the person behind him. Among the group of 3 men and 2 women, Adrian stood out the most. Tall, with a roguish charm. I didn't know him. But Adrian seemed to know me. He strode over and shoved a bottle of milk into my hand. Breakfast. How did you manage to make your hair stick up like that? He laughed, patting my head. So cute. Why are you bullying her? I dodged his hand and asked. Adrian's eyes turned cold. She deliberately got close to you. She's not a good person. Stay away from her. This was probably bullying. Unreasonable and ridiculous. Sophia Becker. Adrian extended an olive branch. Come to my side, and I promise no one will dare to bully you. You don't have to answer now. Think it over. As he turned around, my friend immediately held her head and trembled, looking at me with a pleading expression. Help me. Adrian Starr. I angrily threw the milk at him. The bottle hit his chest, splashing milk everywhere before shattering on the ground. I publicly rejected him. I don't befriend trash. Adrian's followers were scared into silence. He looked furious, ungrateful. Don't regret it. I didn't regret it. Later, I was isolated and bullied, living a life worse than death. In the afternoon, I went to the hospital. My mom's vital signs were stable. I was wiping her face with a towel when the doctor came in for rounds. Sophia? The voice was tentative. I looked up. It was Jensen Cash, with his gentle and deep gaze. Jensen. I stood up, shocked and wide-eyed. We haven't seen each other for 6 years. Jensen was still strikingly handsome. His warm smile and gold-rimmed glasses added a touch of elegance. The white doctor's coat made his broad shoulders and straight back even more prominent. And me. I was wearing a delivery uniform stained with unwashed grease. On my feet were slightly worn-out running shoes. It seemed like I was always in a sorry state whenever I met Jensen. 6 years ago, too. Back then, I had offended Adrian at school. He didn't have to lift a finger. His fanatical followers would take it upon themselves to torment me in various ways. One day, they threw away my painstakingly made class notes. The next day, they poured glue on my chair. The day after, they put dead cockroaches in my cup. Ugh. I rushed out of the classroom, vomiting on the ground. Ugh, it stinks. The girls on the second floor pinched their noses and laughed at me. Some even poured buckets of water on me. I couldn't dodge in time and became drenched. That day, I was wearing a white dress. The thin fabric clung to my skin, cold and damp, and my undergarments became visible. The boys laughed lecherously. I crouched on the ground, hugging myself, and saw my friend Vicky in the crowd. I looked at her, hoping she would take me away. She rolled her eyes and turned away. I felt heartbroken and speechless. In my despair, a shadow loomed over me, and a soft gray blanket wrapped around me. Don't be afraid, it's okay. A handsome young man bent down, wringing out my dripping hair, his smile warm and kind. I heard someone say, "Why is Jensen Cash getting involved in this mess?" Jensen Cash, the student council president. If Adrian was the unruly playboy, Jensen was the exemplary child in every parent's eyes. An outstanding and proud student, the pride of the school. Because of his intervention, the farce was stopped. And because of his protection, my days weren't as unbearable. Jensen studied medicine and had a cleanliness obsession. But even if he studied all night, he would still go out in the snow to get me sweet potatoes just because I offhandedly said. In this weather, I'd love some sweet potatoes. His pants were soaked with snow and rain, his shoes muddy, shivering as he handed me the sweet potatoes, smiling. They're still warm, his are the sweetest. Seeing his disheveled state and dark circles, I called him a fool. Jensen laughed. I'm willing to be a fool. Later, his internship sent him abroad for further studies. I suggested breaking up. He was so anxious that he ran to my house that night, begging my parents to let me go abroad as an exchange student. My dad agreed. He said, "Sophia, don't worry about money. Dad can save enough. You haven't been happy at school, so it's good to study abroad for a year or 2. We support you. It's my fault for being useless, unable to support you." He wiped his tears, lowering his head like a child who did something wrong. I told him I never felt inferior because of my background. To me, they were the greatest and most invaluable. That night, I received a call from an unknown number. When I answered, I heard loud music and a woman shouting, "Mr. Starr, it's your turn to drink." I frowned and was about to hang up. Adrian's muffled voice came through, "Sophia, are you going abroad with Jensen Cash?" "None of your business. You're not allowed to go anywhere." Adrian's domineering tone was baffling. I cursed him as crazy and blocked the number. The day I left for the airport with Jensen, my dad had a car accident. I claimed his body at the morgue. My mom couldn't take the shock. Her old illness relapsed, and she fainted on the spot. For 3 consecutive days, I cried myself awake and then fainted from crying. My eyes were so swollen I couldn't open them. Our neighbors pitied me and helped with the funeral arrangements. The sun was shining brightly that day. But I felt like the sky was overcast and gray, and everything around me was damp and dreary. After the funeral, I received a phone call. The caller was very polite and asked if I was Sophia Becker. I replied, yes. Adrian's hysterical roar came through the phone. "Why hasn't she come to see me yet? Tell her to get over here. Miss Becker, my young master is waiting for you at the hospital." With that, the caller hung up. Both emotionally and rationally, I should visit Adrian. After all, it was my dad who caused his hospitalization. But I didn't expect that Adrian was crippled. He said viciously, "Sophia Becker, your dad did a great job, crippled both my legs in one go. Your entire family's lives aren't worth more than my legs." "I'm sorry." Bearing his harsh accusations, I knelt by the hospital bed. "No matter how much it costs, I'll compensate you." Adrian grabbed my chin, "Call Jensen Cash and break up with him." "What does he have to do with this?" I didn't understand. He frowned impatiently. "Your dad crippled someone and needs to pay compensation, and your mom's hospital expenses are high. What, are you expecting Jensen Cash to help you pay off the debt too? He's a golden boy with a bright future." "And you?" Adrian cruelly patted my face, a burden and a drag. He took my phone out of my bag, unlocked it with facial recognition, and sneered. "He called you more than 30 times. Then he dialed back and handed the phone to me. That day, I said the most heartless, cruel words to Jensen. I heard him crying. And Adrian, leaning against the headboard, was laughing. "Sophia." Jensen's gentle call pulled me back to reality from my memories. He said, "My shift change is coming up soon. How about a cup of coffee together?" I agreed. Red velvet cake. Shortly after sitting down, Jensen pushed a delicate little cake in front of me, cautiously probing. "I remember you used to love it. I wonder if you still do." As if asking if I still liked him now. My hand holding the fork trembled, my nose tingled, and I nodded, "I've always only liked it." I scooped a big piece and stuffed it into my mouth. It was very sweet. So sweet it made me want to cry. "You're still the same." Jensen smiled and leaned in to wipe my mouth. "You've got it all over your face." Looking into his eyes, my heart pounded wildly. Just as I was about to ask him how he's been these years, if he ever thought of me, a cold male voice broke the moment. "Flaunting your affection right in front of me." I instantly felt a chill on my scalp. Adrian sat in a wheelchair, pushed in by a group of friends, staring at me intensely. He didn't speak, but it was as if he was saying, "You're dead. Dr. Cash, long time no see." Adrian pointed to an empty seat. "Mind if I join you?" Jensen's face didn't look good, but he nodded politely. I wanted to find an excuse to leave, but I was afraid that if I wasn't there, Adrian would say something outrageous to Jensen. After all, this guy, apart from his face, he's worthless. "Sophia." Adrian interrupted my daze. "Aren't you going to push me over? Your friends are right behind you." I turned my head in annoyance. Adrian laughed. "Right, the hospital isn't far from here. I'll go check on your mom later." Jesus! I immediately forced a smile and walked up to push his wheelchair. "You're a busy man, no need to make a special trip." "My mom's been doing well lately." Jensen looked a bit surprised. I didn't dare meet his eyes and pushed Adrian to the table. He chatted with Jensen off and on, but his hand was mischievously brushing my hair away from my neck, his cool fingertips scratching my neck. He made a sound of surprise. "Sophia, why aren't you wearing the necklace I bought you?" Hilarious. Did he forget? The day he gave me that necklace, we had a fight, and he threw it out the window into the garden. He had said through gritted teeth, "I'd rather give it to a dog than you." Later. That diamond necklace ended up on his corgi's neck, the corgi named Sophia too. Yes, same name as me. He did it on purpose. The necklace is on your dog's neck. I was speechless. Jensen's hand tightened around his cup handle. "You two are so close, you've been to his house?" "Yes." Adrian grinned, wrapping an arm around my face. "Didn't she tell you?" "Sophia is my dog." "Adrian!" Jensen's usually gentle face was tinged with anger. "Show some respect. Does Dr. Cash want to hit a cripple like me?" Adrian looked at me innocently for help. "Sophia, I'm so scared." His friends laughed. Jensen, usually very patient, was provoked by him. I was afraid he'd really fall for Adrian's trap, so I quickly pulled him aside and explained. "His dog has the same name as me. Has he been bullying you all these years?" Before I could answer, Adrian said provocatively, "So what if I have? What can you do about it? If you want to play hero, you're 6 years too late. But if you really want to save her, we can make a bet. If you win, I won't bother her anymore. Let's see if Dr. Cash dares." Adrian took the spoon I used, scooped a piece of cake, and shoved it in his mouth, grimacing, "So sweet. Jensen, you should go rest." I pulled Jensen towards the door. He paused at the entrance and responded, "I'll take that bet." Adrian took us to a club. It was hidden in the mountains, decorated in a traditional style. Just the main entrance's identity verification was as strict as a secret of organization. As soon as we entered, we understood why. Among the guests were not only big-name celebrities seen on TV but also many business elites and various powerful figures. This place was owned by Adrian's family. Adrian, being eccentric and playful, had even set up a boxing ring on the third basement floor, designed to look like a Roman gladiator arena. We each pick a boxer and see whose pick wins. Outside the large floor-to-ceiling window stood 6 strong boxers in a row. Their fierce looks made it clear they were not to be messed with. "After you," Adrian said, lighting a cigarette and smiling politely. Jensen asked, "What do you want if you win?" "Your hand." Adrian's gaze fell on his hand as he exhaled smoke. "No way." I pleaded with Jensen. "Let's leave, okay? Your hands are for holding surgical tools to save lives, not for his games." Jensen, for some reason, stubbornly agreed. The entire time, my heart was in my throat. I don't like watching boxing matches, I find the sport too violent and bloody. But now, I was leaning against the floor-to-ceiling window, staring intently at the 2 fighters grappling with each other. Adrian handed me a glass of juice. "Who do you want to win?" I glared at him. Adrian didn't get angry, leaning back on the sofa and letting 2 beautiful women massage his head. In the end, Jensen lost. The room erupted in cheers and laughter, except for Jensen and me. "Please, Dr. Cash." Adrian tossed a fruit knife onto the table. I shielded Jensen. "Adrian, stop this, will you?" "A bet is a bet," Adrian said contemptuously. "Can't handle it?" Jensen resolutely stepped forward, placed his hand on the table, and picked up the fruit knife. "No!" I snatched the fruit knife away, glaring at Adrian angrily. "You just can't stand me and want to find ways to torture me, right? Fine, take my hand." As I raised my hand, I heard Adrian curse, "Damn." Before I could react, he lunged forward and grabbed the fruit knife with his whole hand. I was determined to stab myself, so I used a lot of force. Adrian gritted his teeth and groaned in pain. Blood instantly oozed from his palm and fingers, dripping onto the table and my hand. "Mr. Starr!" The people present turned pale with fright. I stared at him in shock, just about to speak when Adrian slapped me. He used a lot of force, and I was knocked to the side. If Jensen hadn't caught me, I might have hit the chair. Adrian, with red eyes, shouted angrily, "Sophia Becker, you damn well have guts. Get out! He threw the blood-stained knife to the ground and started shouting madly. After that incident, Adrian didn't contact me again. I focused on working and making money, visiting the hospital twice a day to take care of my mom. With Jensen around, I felt more at ease. The night before Jensen invited me to a movie, I was rummaging through my wardrobe for an outfit when Adrian called, hauntingly persistent. He teased, "Sophia, did you think I forgot about you? What do you want?" I frowned in disgust. "Accompany me to a banquet tomorrow, and I'll wipe out your debt." As if afraid I wouldn't agree, he added, "I won't bother you and Jensen Cash again." Deal. I had considered the possibility of a trap, but like a drowning person grabbing a piece of driftwood, I had to take the gamble. I canceled my date with Jensen. He wasn't angry and didn't ask much, planning our next date over the phone and saying, "Don't ditch me a third time, or I won't forgive you." I promised wholeheartedly. The banquet was a charity event, with the elite auctioning off their collections. An antique vase, several hundred years old, was on display. It was said to be worth millions. But now, it was broken. Because I had bumped into it. Everyone looked at me with disapproval, while Adrian looked on with amusement. "You bumped into me," I said, glaring at him in panic. Adrian, gloating, said, "Looks like Sophia has to buy this item." A staff member came over to assess the situation and handed me a confirmation of the auction sale. Seeing the zeros following the 5, I nearly fainted. I trembled. He bumped into me, causing the accident. He should pay. You can check the surveillance. The staff glanced at Adrian. He nodded, "Go check." But I had forgotten who Adrian was. Conveniently, the surveillance from my angle was broken. I wanted to call the police. But everyone present was on Adrian's side, acting as witnesses. I felt like a joke, a helpless ant staring at the accusations and slanders around me. "Want to ask Jensen Cash for help?" Adrian said, seeing me shakily take out my phone. He had his assistant hand me a tablet. On it was news of the Cash family's recent financial crisis. "You didn't even tell him about the debt because of your pride. I don't believe you dare ask him for help now. Jensen Cash can hardly protect himself, let alone you." I trembled with rage. "Did you cause the Cash family's troubles too?" Adrian neither confirmed nor denied. He smiled obsessively. "Sophia, I can help you, as long as you bow to me and beg." I asked him, "Are you really trying to drive me to death?" "You won't," Adrian said confidently. "Your mom is still in the hospital and needs your care." For the first time, I felt the person in front of me was a demon. A cold night enveloped my entire body. He had grasped my nature and hit my weak spot. The demon extended his hand. "Sophia Becker, I'll only give you one chance." The night was cool and deep. After my shower, I came out to find Adrian sitting by the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the sea and sky, smoking and gazing at the night view. He beckoned me over. "Come here." I stiffly walked up to him and, at his raised eyebrow signal, took off my bathrobe. Adrian's eyes darkened, and his Adam's apple bobbed up and down. "Sit on me, Sophia." The whole night was filled with humiliation. I bit my lip until it bled, refusing to make a sound. Adrian cruelly wanted me to break this barrier, using relentless methods to torment me. I should have been the one crying, but it was Adrian who cried during the intense moments of intimacy. He was like a drowning man, kissing me repeatedly and saying, "I hurt too, don't leave me." He kept me locked in the hotel for 2 days. I lost count of how many times. After he fell asleep holding me, I ran away. Jensen was sitting at my doorstep, looking haggard. He asked anxiously, "Where have you been?" 2 whole days without a word, not even answering your phone." I couldn't respond, just tears falling down. Okay, I won't ask." Jensen hurriedly wiped my tears. "As long as you're okay. Your mom's showing signs of waking up these days, don't worry." Seeing his usual gentle demeanor, I felt a wave of frustration. Thinking about the countless shameless scenes over the past 2 nights, I couldn't help but rush out of the hallway to throw up. Jensen tried to help me, but I pushed him away. "Don't touch me, please." He looked at me in shock but didn't ask more, quietly accompanying me inside. "I need to go back to the hospital, the porridge will be cold." Jensen gently set the porridge on the table and left. I sat in a daze all afternoon, and by evening, I received a call from Adrian. He was shouting like a madman again, "Sophia, you don't recognize people after getting out of bed, huh? Don't think that just because Jensen Cash paid your compensation, you can get rid of me. My leg was crippled by your dad." I turned off my phone and blocked him. Jensen came to see me that evening. He never mentioned helping me pay the compensation, continuing to gently make dinner as usual. While cooking, he didn't care if I was listening or not, laughingly sharing the bizarre and interesting things that happened at the hospital during the day. He was like a light, illuminating my dark and muddy world. Jensen. I walked up and hugged him, crying, "I wish I wasn't Sophia Becker." I had never felt ashamed of my background or my downfall. But now, I felt cowardly. I wished I wasn't Sophia Becker. I wished I were a clean girl, with an education and a family background, someone who could match him. But I love Sophia Becker. Jensen put down the spatula, turned, and smiled gently. "No matter what you're like, I love you. Don't you think I'm a burden?" He smiled. "Sophia, marry me." I was so shocked I couldn't speak. But Jensen was serious. He took me to buy a diamond ring and meet his parents. He had a warm and humble family. His parents were calm, reserved, and deeply in love. It must be such a family that could raise a good child like Jensen. On the way to meet his parents, I thought of many possibilities. Being rejected, being looked down upon. But I never expected Jensen's mother to hold my hand with a face full of heartache and say, "Sophia, you've suffered." My nose stung, and I cried. All these years, I had been holding on, working hard to make money, tirelessly from dawn to dusk. Working during the day, hiding in damp alleys to gnaw on cold buns. At night, I studied and prepared for exams. Everyone said, "Sophia, you're so desperate to make money, you must be crazy about it." After kissing Jensen goodbye downstairs, he said, "I have a vacation on the 12th of next month. Let's go pick out a wedding dress together." He looked like a happy teenager, ran a few steps, turned back to wave at me, and reluctantly got into the car and left. Bang! As soon as I opened the door upstairs, I heard something shatter inside the house. The moment I turned on the lights, I saw Adrian sitting in the middle of the mess. It was scarier than seeing a ghost. "How did you get in here?" "Get out!" I shouted nervously, trying to take out my phone to call the police, but his bodyguard snatched it away and pushed me inside. After not seeing him for 2 months, Adrian's eyes were red, his face pale, looking both agitated and deranged. He growled darkly, "What's so great about Jensen Cash?" I scorned him. "You can't even compare to him." Adrian looked like he was about to cry, staring at me intently for a moment before suddenly covering his face and laughing. "You're all the same, you all want to abandon me. Does Jensen Cash know you've slept with me? He must have never seen you in bed, right?" He waved the envelope in his hand, and dozens of photos scattered all over the floor. They were all intimate bed photos of Adrian and me from those 2 days in the hotel. Various angles and positions. I felt as cold as if I had been fished out of icy water. Adrian shamelessly said his parents would probably be very interested in seeing these too. I frantically grabbed the photos on the floor and tore them up. I tore up dozens of them, my palm getting cut and bleeding from the sharp edges. Adrian smiled and said, "These are just copies. Why are you doing this to me?" I screamed while pushing him to the ground. Adrian struggled to get up, his mouth bleeding from hitting the table, yet he leaned against it and laughed. "Break up with him," Adrian ordered coldly. "You know I can follow through on my words." I was on the verge of a breakdown, walked to the kitchen, and pulled out a fruit knife, pointing it at Adrian. He looked up at me. "Yes, unless I die, I won't let you live in peace, nor the Cash family." The Cash family was indeed in a precarious situation. I eventually broke up with Jensen and chose to avoid him. As long as Adrian was around, I would harm him. My mom was secretly transferred to another hospital. I was also forced to move, leaving Jensen behind once again. For the 3rd time. He said he'd never forgive me. Jensen was deeply hurt and despondently chose to go to the battlefield for medical aid. Half a year later, the next news I heard about him was a tragedy. Jensen went missing on the battlefield. In a place ravaged by war, missing subtly meant being blown to pieces by explosives. I broke down crying when I received the news on the street. On the bustling street, kind strangers stopped to ask what was wrong. I said, "My lover is dead." My heart died too. After half a month of depression, the only thing that brought me back to reality was my mom waking up. Adrian arrived before me, no longer deranged, acting like a gentle and caring child towards my mom. He was so polite it was as if he had been possessed. My mom asked me, "Sophia, is he your boyfriend?" In front of Adrian, I didn't dare to tell the truth and didn't want to answer, so I changed the subject. When she was discharged, I warned Adrian not to say anything reckless to my mom. MHM. He nodded, pretending to be obedient. But I couldn't stop others from talking, and my mom found out everything. Feeling like a burden, she jumped from a high building. She fell to her death right in front of me. I don't know how I pushed through the crowd and rushed in to hug her. I just remember being covered in blood. The medical staff pulled me away, and my ears were buzzing, unable to hear anything. Eventually, I passed out. When I woke up, Adrian was by my bedside, holding my hand, his eyes bloodshot. He even had stubble on his chin. Though he was hateful, he was always impeccably dressed, never this disheveled. "Sophia." He managed to smile, but before he could say another word, I swung my fist at his face and shouted angrily. "Was it you who caused trouble behind my back, spreading lies to her?" He didn't dodge, letting me hit him. It wasn't until his face was swollen that he finally said, "It wasn't me, but I will find out who it was." I told him to get lost. But he came back after just a few days. That day, unfortunately, there was a commotion at the hospital. A patient, holding a knife, was injuring people and had stabbed a nurse at the nurse's station. I heard the noise and stepped out of the ward. "Sophia!" As the patient rushed at me, Adrian was just coming out of the elevator. He shouted and, surprisingly, stood up from his wheelchair and ran towards me. I was stunned by everything. So much so that when Adrian hugged me and used his back to block the patient's knife, my mind went blank. Adrian's bodyguards quickly subdued the patient. "Mr. Starr!" Everyone rushed to pull Adrian away, his back soaked with blood. He grasped my shoulders and looked me up and down, asking nervously, "Are you hurt?" "Don't be afraid, don't be afraid." He cupped my face to comfort me. I stared at him and asked, "When did your legs get better?" Adrian averted his eyes guiltily. "You've been better for a while?" I grabbed his collar and screamed hysterically. "Do you think it's fun to play with me? To trample on someone's guilt and dignity?" "I can explain." Adrian choked, but I had already slapped him several times, shocking everyone present. When I tried to slap him again, my raised hand was suddenly grabbed. "How dare you hit my son?" A dignified middle-aged man with graying hair glared at me coldly, and several bodyguards immediately pulled Adrian away. "Dad!" Adrian screamed, his face pale as a ghost, "Don't touch her. Useless thing, letting a woman climb on top of you and beat you like a dog." Adrian's father let go, dragged Adrian into an empty ward without a word. I didn't know what the two were arguing about, but it was a fierce fight, with sounds of things being smashed. When he came out, I saw Adrian lying on the ground, barely conscious, his head covered in blood. His left eye was so swollen he couldn't open it. When he looked up and saw me standing at the door, he buried his head in his arms helplessly. "Serves you right." I wanted to curse these words, but someone beat me to it. A rich girl with curly hair down to her waist, dressed in designer clothes. She extended her hand to me and introduced herself. Aaron Dummett, the fiancé of the injured man inside. Aaron Dummett and I went to the ward, where she bluntly handed me a check. "I wasn't in the country before. Thank you for taking care of Adrian. You won't need to trouble yourself anymore." I couldn't be happier. I pushed the check back to her, but this money should come from Adrian. Aaron looked me over for a moment, then said with a sweet smile, "Adrian really likes you. His room is full of your photos. But he's such a terrible person, not worth liking. He never told you, did he? His mother was driven to take her own life by him, hanging herself while on her knees." She spoke as if gossiping, looking both innocent and creepy. I didn't understand why she was telling me all this. If she liked Adrian, she showed no sadness when speaking about these things, rather like she was watching a show. Even a bit gloating. I couldn't help but ask, "Do you like him?" "Yes." Aaron's face lit up with a playful charm. "Our families are old friends, and we were betrothed as children, but he doesn't like me." "But that's okay, I get what I want, even if he doesn't like it. Don't be fooled by how he's surrounded by people outside, at home he's just his father's punching bag. When he was beaten bloody as a child, I was the one who disinfected and bandaged him. I've seen him at his worst, like a stray dog. I felt chills down my spine. Indeed, such an environment would breed someone as twisted as Adrian. And this Miss Dummett too. Both are bizarre, a perfect match for each other. But it has nothing to do with me." I turned away, no longer engaging with her, clearly signaling her to leave. Aaron leisurely said, "Miss Becker, the car accident involving your father and Adrian was caused by him running a red light and crossing the road. He said he was rushing to the airport to find you because you were running away with another man. His legs had a chance to recover, but he deliberately hid it from you and pretended to be disabled to gain your sympathy." Aaron Dummett threw a stack of documents at me. She bluntly said, "After reading this, I believe you and Adrian have no chance anymore. It won't threaten our future marriage." The more I flipped through the stack, the angrier I got, until I ended up crying without a single tear left. What is this? Using my guilt to indirectly destroy my family, forcing me to drop out of school and work. Ruining my life. Ah. I angrily threw the documents. Adrian walked in and got hit on the forehead by the flying papers. When he saw the contents, he stood frozen for a long time. "Adrian Starr, what kind of deep-seated hatred do you have for me to destroy everything I have?" I stumbled out of bed and began hitting him with all my strength. He didn't fight back, letting me vent my anger, even tearing open his bandaged wound, making it bleed heavily. "My dad crashed to avoid you and died. My mom, not wanting to burden me, jumped off the building. Jensen Cash, he also died." The pain pierced my heart like needles, and I felt dizzy. Adrian cried and knelt in front of me. "Sophia, I was wrong. At that time, I only wanted to use this to keep you by my side. I didn't intend to really destroy you. Please give me another chance." I retreated, and he crawled on his knees. "Forgive you?" I gritted my teeth and said, "Only if you die." I've never hated someone so much in my life. I remembered what Adrian once said, that if you can't love, hate is also a way to stay in the other person's memory forever. He succeeded. 3 days later, Adrian's father found me. He opened his mouth and said, "The Starr and Dummett families have a marriage contract. For the sake of the business merger, they must marry. Miss Becker, you are a smart person. Please leave my son. You should say, please tell your son to stop bothering me." I threw the copy of the documents Aaron gave me in front of him. "Mr. Starr, I never liked your son. On the contrary, it was your son who destroyed my peaceful and happy family, ruined my academic and career prospects. If this matter were to be exposed, it would certainly be a big scandal." Mr. Starr was a businessman, leaning back in his chair. "How much do you want?" "50 million. I said straightforwardly, "It's what you owe me." I got the money as I wished. After that, I focused on my studies and got into college through self-study. After obtaining my degree, I chose to go abroad for further education. Adrian came to see me a few times. His Maybach would park quietly under the shade of a tree not far away, following my bus to the stop, then silently leaving. Several times he went crazy, kneeling under my apartment in the pouring rain, crying and shouting. He knelt until he fainted, and was eventually dragged away by Aaron. The last time I saw him was in midsummer. He was covered in blood, stumbling and waiting in the hallway. I pulled out a utility knife from my bag. "If you dare to come over, I'll kill you." Adrian looked hurt. He lowered his head, choking, I won't come again. I just came to check if you're safe." After saying that, he staggered away. Sure enough, he never appeared again. Before going abroad, I took out a portion of the money to help Jensen's family alleviate their financial crisis. Mr. Cash transferred some shares to me. On the day I went to the airport, Jensen's parents came to see me off, crying like children. After finishing my graduate studies in Germany, I made a bold decision to go to the war zone where Jensen had supported. I wanted to find any trace of him. Unexpectedly, I found a pleasant surprise. After rolling down a hill during a bombing, I woke up to be rescued by a local man covered in dust. When he was stitching my wound, I noticed a familiar wedding ring on his ring finger. "Jensen?" I called out tentatively. He didn't respond, holding a basin of water and about to leave. Ignoring my pain, I ran up to grab him, pushing aside the hair on his face. The moment I saw clearly, I was shocked speechless. It was Jensen Cash. But his left face seemed to have been hit by shrapnel, leaving a hideous scar. He remembered nothing, like a bewildered and timid child, holding his head and crying in the corner. He cried and begged, "Don't hit me, don't hit me." I covered my mouth, not daring to make a sound, quietly watching his panicked appearance, my heart aching to the extreme. "No one will hit you." I finally calmed down, slowly approached, and gently stroked his head to soothe him, just like he used to do. "Sophia is here, no one will hit you anymore, let's go home, okay?" "Sophia." He murmured the name repeatedly, looked up at me in confusion, and finally nodded slowly. I brought Jensen back to the capital. Mr. and Mrs. Cash hugged their bewildered and amnesiac son, crying uncontrollably but also extremely joyful. "Alive is good, alive is good. Sophia, thank you." I smiled and shook my head. Watching them walk ahead, Jensen suddenly broke free from his parents and rushed towards me. He smiled gently as he used to, extending his hand to me. "Sophia, let's go home together." Jensen gradually recovered through rehabilitation training. He could read the words in books, holding medical books and reading them in the study all day. He slowly began to recall past events. I stayed by his side all the time and finally decided to marry him. On the day of the wedding dress fitting, Adrian called me. I was about to hang up when I heard his hoarse voice say, "Sophia, I'm getting married today." His voice was somewhat unclear, as if there was wind blowing past the receiver, and he asked vaguely, "It's been 2 years, can you forgive me?" I clenched my phone and replied word by word, "Never." Adrian seemed to laugh. The call abruptly ended, and I disgustedly blocked the number. That night, the news exploded with headlines. Adrian Starr, the young master of a prominent family, jumped off a high building on his wedding night and died on the spot. Adrian Starr's side story. I am Adrian Starr. Outsiders envy my background, being born in Rome. But they don't know that a seemingly happy, wealthy, and powerful family can be rotten and stinking inside. My mother's name is Emily. She was a passionate and radiant woman, like a rose. She was still a junior member of a dance troupe when she met my dad. Her bright and sunny personality attracted the gloomy and hypocritical him. They fell in love, held a grand wedding that shook the entire social circle in the capital. They were sweet for a while after marriage. Until she got the chance to be promoted to the principal dancer of the troupe, and at that critical moment, she found out she was pregnant. She didn't dare to tell my dad because she knew he would make her give up the promotion opportunity. So, she secretly aborted the child. My dad found out about it 3 months later, on the day she returned from a tour in France. He angrily questioned her and beat her. That was the beginning of her nightmare. After that, my dad took it upon himself to resign her from her job and imprisoned her at home, eventually making her pregnant again and giving birth to me. From my earliest memories, she never smiled. So, I couldn't imagine how the housekeeper said she used to smile so brightly and beautifully. Whenever I approached, she would cry. But she never took her resentment out on me. She gently taught me to read, plant flowers, and make dolls for the children in the orphanage. But my dad hated these things and would argue with her. "He's a boy, don't always let him do these girls' things." Whenever they argued, it would turn into a fight. She didn't have the ability to fight back and was always left bruised and battered. Later, it got worse, and my dad would hit her at the slightest displeasure. I never saw them fight. Because every time, she would push me out the door and gently instruct me. "Adrian, be good. No matter what you hear, don't come in. Be obedient." She had thought about running away. But my dad had so much power that he could always catch her. Every time he brought her back, she would suffer even worse treatment. He even threatened her friends and family. She almost died once, lying in the bathtub with her wrists slit, blood everywhere. I was the one who found her and sought help. When she woke up in the hospital, she got angry at me for the first time. She said, "Why did you save me?" She screamed hysterically, and the doctor had to sedate her to calm her down. I started trying to shield her from my dad. My dad would beat me too, lock me in a dark room, and force me to admit my mistakes. But I would still choose to stand in front of her and get hurt again and again. Silly Adrian. She would hold me and cry, heartbroken, give me a bottle of milk, and sing lullabies to coax me to sleep. Until one day, when elementary school let out early, I saw her kissing the bodyguard in the greenhouse. The bodyguard said, "I've arranged everything for tomorrow night. I'll definitely take you away from here forever." She hesitated. "What about Adrian? If you don't leave, you'll be beaten to death sooner or later. Can you bear to let Adrian watch his mother be beaten to death by his father?" She finally nodded and agreed. That night, I asked her if she would leave me. She hesitated and said no. She was obviously lying. She was going to run away with another man, have other children, and never want me again. So, I told my dad. That night was a stormy night, with lightning and thunder. The bodyguard was beaten bloody, kneeling in the rain, with two vicious dogs tearing at him. My dad was laughing, and my mom was crying bitterly. Then he dragged her by the hair back into the house. She saw me there, and this time she didn't close the door. I saw everything. My dad was beating her, treating her like an animal, punching and kicking her, then dragging her to the bed to humiliate her. She screamed miserably, her fingers gripping the edge of the bed, her nails splitting and bleeding. I was terrified and wet myself. After the storm, she staggered to me, her clothes disheveled, and knelt in front of me. She looked at me with a grim expression, no longer with her usual gentleness and warmth, and said viciously, "You're a devil too." That day, she died. She tied a bath towel to the sink in the bathroom and strangled herself while kneeling. My dad told me, "You did nothing wrong. Even if something is broken and destroyed, it can't be given to someone else." So, I treated Sophia the same way. The first time I met Sophia was on a sunny afternoon. I was waiting at a red light when I saw a father and his son. The father, for some reason, was yelling at his son and even hitting him with an umbrella. The boy's face was covered in bruises and swelling, clearly a result of abuse. People on the street glanced over and then indifferently walked away. I seemed to see my past self in that boy. His dark eyes were filled with fear and a plea for help. He was begging for someone's assistance. I was never one to meddle in others' affairs, but this time I couldn't hold back and rushed over. I had already made up my mind to give that father a good beating, to let him know what a fist feels like. I've already called the police. Sophia rushed over first and stood in front of the boy. She was slender and tall, a stark contrast to the man's build, but she bravely spread her arms to protect the boy. She argued with the man, insisting that the police report the case to the Child Violence Association when they arrived. I could never forget how radiant she looked standing in the crowd, her gentle and comforting expression towards the child. As she passed by me that day, the wind lifted her hair, bringing with it a faint floral fragrance. I thought I would never see her again, but to my surprise, she was also at the university I attended. I had never felt so excited. I learned her name and also that Vicky, who actively approached her, was not a good person. That girl appeared sweet but actually lured friends into prostitution by introducing them to wealthy old men. Sophia's family background and appearance made her Vicky's favorite target. I was furious and went to confront her, only to be misunderstood and scolded by Sophia. She called me trash. How piercing the word was. My dad used to say the same thing when he hit me, that I was garbage just like my mom. I was very angry, at least, at that moment, anger overshadowed my concern for her. I casually complained at a club, and my friends took it upon themselves to torment Sophia at school. When I returned to school, intending to explain to Sophia why I had bullied Vicky, I found out that Sophia had been bullied. That day, just as I was about to go rescue her from being drenched, Jensen Cash stepped in first. I watched them walk away together and then turned back to harshly reprimand those who bullied her. But it was too late. Sophia despised me, even to the point of deep hatred. She grew closer to Jensen Cash, and they even started dating. I deliberately manipulated things so Jensen Cash would graduate and go abroad, hoping to separate them. But I never expected that Sophia would decide to go with him. The day I found out, I hurriedly rode my motorcycle to the airport. I was distracted. I collided with an oncoming small truck. The truck driver tried to avoid me and crashed into a streetlight. When I was taken to the hospital, my legs were numb, but the doctor said I had a chance to walk again after recovery. I asked my friend, "How is the truck driver?" My friend hesitated for a long time and then said the driver died on the spot. "Adrian, that driver seems to be Sophia Becker's father." I was stunned. I caused the death of Sophia's father, and because of this, she couldn't go abroad. Her mother was so shocked that she collapsed in the hospital and fell into a coma. Directly and indirectly, I plunged Sophia into a miserable life. I wanted to confess my mistake and beg for her forgiveness. But at the hospital, I overheard her talking on the phone with Jensen Cash, so sorrowful and full of affection that it made me furious. I remembered my father's words, "The person you love, you can't let anyone else have, even if it shatters them." So I hid the truth about her father's death and fabricated a story, making her feel guilty and binding her to me. I wanted to push her into the mud so she would despair and seek my help. But Sophia, even though she endured hardship, never once asked me for help. She tolerated me because of the compensation and her mother and attempts to please me, but her eyes were filled with hatred. That radiant smile of hers on that sunny afternoon never appeared on her face again. I secretly arranged for the best hospital equipment for her mother, charging only the cost of regular equipment. When she occasionally couldn't afford it, I would find an excuse to help. She still got involved with Jensen Cash when he returned home, even protecting him in front of me at the cost of injuring her hand. I was truly furious. I maliciously saddled her with enormous debts and caused problems for Jensen's company. This time, she finally came to me for help. I got what I wanted, but she lay on the bed lifelessly, like a corpse. She looked as if she was ready to face death. I was deeply frustrated, feeling like a pathetic scoundrel. But even so, why did she still want to marry Jensen Cash? I crazily tried to keep her with my obsessive ways, even driving Jensen Cash away. That guy actually thought of going to a war zone to provide medical aid, such a brave but reckless decision, and eventually, he went missing. Everyone said he was surely dead. That day, I danced to the music at home and drank a whole bottle of wine in celebration. Good riddance. I couldn't wait to comfort Sophia, but she tried to kill me. Luckily, her mother woke up, and I worked hard to win her mother's favor. As long as I got the approval of her parents, there was still a chance for Sophia and me. But then my father found out. Years ago, he had already tied me to Aaron Dummett. Our union was a perfect business match, making our families unbeatable in the capital circle. He used some tricks, and when Sophia's mother learned the truth, she chose to jump off a building to avoid burdening her daughter. She died right in front of Sophia. That day, Sophia held her blood-soaked mother, crying and breaking down, looking exactly like I did when I was a child. I was stunned. I seemed to have done something terribly wrong, turning the light in my heart into the same darkness I once wallowed in. I carried the unconscious Sophia and rushed her to the hospital for emergency treatment. When she woke up, her first reaction was to blame me for her mother's death and tried to hit me. My father came. He was a ruthless tyrant, and I feared he would harm Sophia. I defended Sophia, and he questioned if I refused Aaron because of her. For the first time, I confronted and resisted him. In a fit of rage, he beat me until I was bloody and couldn't stand. This wretched scene was witnessed by Sophia. I was utterly ashamed. That day was chaotic. Aaron also came and revealed the truth I had desperately tried to hide to Sophia. I knew Sophia was really going to leave me. I knelt and begged her not to abandon me, just like my mother did years ago. Not to leave me alone in the darkness. But she was so resolute, hoping I would die. My father said the same, that if I didn't break ties with Sophia and marry Aaron, he couldn't guarantee Sophia wouldn't take her own life at home one day. I was terrified. I stopped disturbing Sophia, only daring to watch her from afar. Without me, she seemed to indeed live well. Positive and striving, she worked hard to further her studies. She became the sunflower I saw on the street years ago. It turned out, I was the one blocking the sunlight over her head. She went abroad and even to the war zone. I sent someone to follow her, to be her friend and colleague, protecting her safety along the way. When she returned, she brought back the severely injured and amnesiac Jensen. I was very sad but also relieved that Jensen wasn't dead. He was also Sophia's salvation, I suppose. They lived well, and Jensen's parents treated her well too. She had a family. The day Sophia went to pick out her wedding dress was the day of my wedding with Aaron. They didn't know, but I had been suffering from depression for 2 whole years. That day, I climbed to the rooftop, mustered up the courage to call Sophia, humbly begging for forgiveness. But she refused, saying she would never forgive me. As expected, I felt relieved instead, hung up the phone, and jumped. I'm sorry, Sophia. Such a vile person like me, even my mother wouldn't want me in the afterlife. I deserved this.